Hey guys, it's Nicole. I wanted to sit down today and chat to you about the books I read back in December. It's February when I'm filming this, by the way, so it's been a while since I read these books and I should have done this sooner, but December was not my month. However, I still had some thoughts on these books that I read and I wanted to share them. So when this video goes live, I will probably call it recent reads just to save my self a little bit from looking unprofessional. But then I will change it later on. The first book I want to chat about is A Twisted Blade. This is the sequel to The Song of the Mark and it's part of the Shadow and Crowns series. I read book one, I think it was around November or maybe October, and I loved it. I had such a fun time. It's nothing new in terms of fantasy and it is something I would probably categorize as being sort of fantasy romance, but still quite light on the romance for fantasy romance. So some people may categorize it just strictly as fantasy. Book one, we're introduced to our main character Cassia, who works for this group of mercenaries. They have a bit of a family relationship dynamic going on, and they live in this world where there's this plague, this sickness, and a lot of people get sick. They fade in terms of their colouring. Their hair goes paler, their eyes get pale, they become all silvery, is the descriptions of their colouring in terms of hair and eyes. And then these people die. There's no real known cause of this sickness, but it's been something that's happened in this particular kingdom for many years. And Cassia, our main character, has had this sickness, but she survived. So she is a rare case where she survived. So from the get-go, we know there's something special about her. And her mentor that she grew up with also survived, and the mentor works in the mercenaries and is kind of like a mother figure for her as well. The sickness is this huge mystery, and there is a prince or king. I can't even remember at the beginning if he's a prince or king. I think he's a king. He takes people who have survived the sickness, he takes them in. There's a lot of whispering about what he does to them because those people, they never reappear. They disappear once he's taken them. So it's believed that he does something to them. So Cassie has always been living in hiding for this reason. However, she finds herself in book one captured, and she ends up working with the prince after she's captured, and that's kind of like book one. So I can't say too much in terms of what happens in book two, but a huge reason why she's led to the prince is his captain of the guard comes across Cassia and they have a few encounters, and then one thing leads to another and they're in the castle together. Cassie is captured by the prince and he's kind of there. They kind of have feelings for one another. That's the setup, the gist. But what I loved about book one was there was so much happening in the world. There's also beliefs in this world that the sickness might be connected to the gods and that this kingdom in particular has done something to upset the gods. So I really like that element. I love meddling gods in fantasy, particularly when it impacts the magic system. I think that's really fun, and that's what we had here. I just loved it. I loved the family dynamic with Cassia and her group of friends. I really liked the romance setup. An evil king or prince I think is always fun, just a tyrant in the fantasy story. I don't know, they're awful but they're fun. They create some stressful but interesting situations. So yeah, it just had a lot of elements of fantasy I really enjoyed in book one, so I was really excited for book two. However, I will say I was disappointed. I gave book two 3 stars. It might have been a bit of a generous 3 stars. First of all, it's a very long book. I listened to the audiobook, but I'm pretty sure the physical copy is over 500 pages long. I think the book definitely needed an editor. It could have been cut down. I think it took quite some time for the actual plot to progress and the story to get to the point. There was so much action that was just saved to the end of the story, which is always fun when the book finishes on such a high note. But sometimes I think fantasy books can really just try and draw out the conflict way too much to create build up, but then the conflict's over so quickly, and sometimes I would rather the conflict be extended. And then there were things that really fell to the side. I felt like the friends that Cassia had that we started to get to know really well in book 1 were completely tossed aside. They were hardly present in the story. I honestly kind of forgot who was there, like who were her friends. Cassia as a main character as well is quite frustrating. In book 1, I definitely found her a bit of a frustrating character at times. Like, she's very gullible. I don't think she's as clever as we're told she is. I forgave it more in book 1 because I was just wrapped up in the story. I was having so much fun, whereas here I think it became a lot more prominent. Her character flaws. The pacing in this book was also off. I think the pacing was really well done, and the story was also very action-packed in book 1, which was what made it such a fun read for me. But here, like I said, it took like the entire book for nothing to happen, and then at the very end, that's where all the action and all the things were happening. I did like that we got little snippets of Alander, who is the love interest. We got his POV a little bit. Sometimes I don't like it when it's like constant switching between two POVs, but I like it when we get like a snippet here and there, and that's what we got here, and I did quite enjoy that. I do definitely plan to continue on to the next book whenever I get the chance, but my expectations have been lowered slightly. The next book I completed is Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. It caught my attention because it made the Goodreads Choice Awards thriller finalists, and everyone seemed to be reading it in December, so I kind of just wanted to jump on that bandwagon. But also it's about time travel, and I love books about time travel. Time travel is like one of my favorite tropes, so I wanted to read it for that reason. This book follows our protagonist Jen, who is a mother, and she witnesses her son, who I think he's like just turned 18 if I'm remembering correctly. He commits murder, and she witnesses this. She wakes up the next day after the murder, but it's not the next day, it's the day before the murder, and all of a sudden she finds herself in this Groundhog Day situation, but instead of going forward or being stuck in the same day, she's going backwards in time. And as she goes back in time, she uses each day to try and figure out what happened, what led to her son committing this murder. I loved the setup, and I think the first third of this book I was so hooked, and I thought drew me in straight away. I loved the concept, but as the story went on, I definitely lost interest. It's quite slow paced, which at the beginning I didn't mind, but I think I would have preferred a little bit of build up because there was definitely a period where I got bored. She also goes like so far back in time. I wasn't really expecting it, and I didn't really like it. I don't know, it was like, oh damn, this thing had been building up for like years. I think I lost interest because there was so much of the story that became less about the initial murder and crime and more about her life. I really don't have much to say on this. I just think it just took a little bit long. It just ended up feeling a bit long. I liked it enough to give it 3 stars, and I definitely think I would be willing to give this author another go with another book because I think her ideas were so cool. There was a couple twists as well that I really enjoyed and I didn't see coming, so it had those fun like thriller elements, but I think the pacing just didn't quite work for me. I then listened to a romance book on audio called Mad About You, and this book honestly was such a delightful read. I think I only gave it 3 stars, but it's a really high 3 stars, so I might even bump it up to a 3.5. I don't know, just thinking back on it, I have a lot of fond feelings towards this book. We essentially follow our main character, I think her name was Harriet, and she is a wedding photographer, and she's quite like renowned where she lives. She's quite popular, she's often like booked out all the time, and it starts off and she's meant to be a photographer for this wedding, but the groom backs out at the last minute, so the wedding doesn't happen. Then she is proposed to herself, her long-term boyfriend proposes to her, and she doesn't want to get married. He's known this from the get-go. She's still living with him, stuck with this boyfriend who proposed. It's the most awkward situation because when he first proposed, he did it in front of his entire family and she couldn't say no in that situation. So she said yes and then she told him no. And they're still living together, so it's very, very awkward, and she needs to move out because she doesn't want to continue living with him and he doesn't want to break up with her, so yeah, get out. So she finds herself this rental to move in with someone who is looking for a roommate. When she moves in with this new person, she realizes it's the groom, the runaway groom from the wedding she was meant to be a photographer at. I will say what I liked about this is the romance is really on the side. Like, there is a romance between these two characters, but it's very slow to develop. It's a story that's very much more about the character development of Harriet rather than the development of the romance, which I really loved. It's all about like gaslighting and abuse, like particularly like abusive relationships and how they can come in different ways and different forms. And I just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed like Harriet's story and just following her. It was really quite pleasant. I wish I could remember more though. I think that's one thing I will say, is it's not the most memorable book. I mean, it's been like 2 months since I read it, so it's very fuzzy in my head in terms of memory, but I do remember how it made me feel. So I think that's still quite a positive thing to say about it. I then read 5 Survive by Miss Holly Jackson and I loved this. I gave it 5 stars, and there is a part of me that is now like, was I being too generous with this? I've seen so many like negative reviews come out about this book since I've read it, and it has made me like waver a little bit. I might have been a little bit generous because last year I feel like I hardly had any 5 stars, and this book was my first 5-star book in like a while. I really have a thing for survival stories. I love them. I know they're a little bit ridiculous and they can be quite dramatic, but I find them so fun. Like, I love being invested in them and kind of scared and on the edge of your seat. Anyway, this book, what it's actually about. This book, we follow 6 friends who are going on a getaway for the spring break holiday, and they're taking this like camper van, or is it camper van? Is it RV? I'm really bad with my like terminology. What is it called? This is gonna annoy me. Yeah, it's an RV. Okay, I got that right. So they're in an RV, they're traveling, and they kind of get caught up in this sniper attack. They go the wrong way, they're in a bit of a dead end in the middle of nowhere, and then all of a sudden this sniper is shooting at them. The tires are gone, they're stuck, they're stranded, they're shitting themselves. And one of the friends, according to the sniper, has a secret that they have to reveal, and that's why the sniper has targeted them. But it turns out that every single one of these friends has a secret, and so they all end up revealing their secrets because no one's really sure who the sniper is attacking and why. And I love it. I love that trope of people, you know, having these dirty secrets and their dirty laundry being aired in this like stressful, intense situation. I thought it was so much fun. I didn't see the twists, and I really liked how the plot unfolded. I thought it was so good. I really enjoyed it. When I was looking up Goodreads reviews, a lot of people complained that majority of the book is dialogued, which I don't think impacted my reading experience because I did listen to the audiobook. I thought the audiobook was brilliant. Also, this book made me cry. I got that emotionally invested in the characters. I think it might have been right time, right place in terms of reading this book, but I still think it was good. Maybe not the best writing, but sometimes if the story is really good, I can be like captured by a really good action-packed, well-paced story quite easily, and like that really pleased me here. I also completed The Archive of the Forgotten, which is the sequel to The Library of the Unwritten. I really enjoyed the sequel. I think it was a really good follow-up. I really liked how there was such a big focus on the aftermath and the consequences from book 1. So much happened in book 1, and our characters have really had to change, like been forced to change because of it. I think it was really fantastic writing in terms of character development to see these characters adjust to these changes, and they're still resisting to the changes in book 1. This is a series that essentially just takes place in the Library of Hell, and in this library, it's a library of all the unwritten books, so all the uncompleted books that were never published. And here resides all the characters. Here resides like authors, like muses, so like inspiration for all these books. This is a book where I would say not a whole lot happened, but I enjoyed every minute I spent with the characters, and I love the world. I love how this book just talks about its love of stories and how important stories are and how important your own stories are. I think I made this comment when I read the first book, but a lot of these characters are characters who haven't succeeded in terms of like their big life goal, or they've done something that makes them feel like a failure in some capacity. And I really liked how this book spoke about that and how these characters dealt with that, because that can be something really hard to deal with. The last book I have to talk about is The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin. I really enjoyed this. This I think was my favorite book of the month, although I didn't give it 5 stars. I think I gave it like a 4.5. I adored this. It is essentially set in this Egyptian inspired fantasy setting, and in this setting we have these priests of a sort who are assassins. They're a little bit different though, because they go around basically killing people in their sleep, but sometimes they do mercy killing, so it might be someone old or someone sick, someone ready to die, and they help them pass on in the afterlife by visiting them while they're sleeping and also taking their life. But it's like a peaceful way, and it's done in a very like religious peaceful way. But then they're also lawmakers of a sort, because they also help execute people who have committed gravest crimes that convicts them of being executed. So these priests carry out these executions. The plot and the main conflict in this story is there's now questions about the religion and the order and the way killings are done, and if it's corrupted. And there's also killings that start to occur around the city. There ends up being a little bit of conflict, I would say, between the religion and the monarchy in this setting. I think what N.K. Jemisin really excels at is her world building. It is beautiful. It is so immaculate. It is so in-depth, and I loved the world. I love the magic. I love the setup. I love it when we have all these different orders and we know how they work, and also the people behind them and their like political maneuverings and goals and what's going on, that and then that causes conflict with their like opposing party. And that's very much the setup in this book. And then we have like characters who aren't really they're not the main like political figures and the people making the decisions and the orders, but they're the ones who are being impacted, at least like the main character, that's for sure. And I loved it. It's kind of like the main theme of this, or the main theme I took away from it and I really enjoyed, was the conflict between church and state, which I just thought was so fascinating. And the magic system related to dreams, and there's this dream goddess, and that's why the magic system exists, and the way it's all religious. I thought it was so good. I really do like religious themes in my books. They're just so good. I love exploring them. I love the way N.K. Jemisin explored it in here. I do think though that the world building and the magic system outshine the characters a lot. I think there was one character I think was particularly a standout, who was the villain in here. I thought that character was very fascinating. Motivations were very fascinating. Backstory I was very intrigued about, but yeah, I think I would have liked maybe a little bit more from the characters. I think that was like the one critique I really have, but overall I really enjoyed this. And it is essentially a standalone fantasy. There is a sequel because it is technically a duology. However, the sequel is set many years, I think it might be even a decade after the events of this book, so I won't be in the rush to get to it, I think, but I'm intrigued, very intrigued. I'll leave it there. Those are all the books I read in December. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what was the book you finished 2022 with. I want to know. My last book was The Archive of the Forgotten. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Sorry, this probably wasn't the best wrap up. I feel like I just rambled and my memory on all these books is like completely gone, and I usually take notes as I read, and for most of these I didn't, so who knows how this video is going to turn out. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you next time for the next one. Bye.